Hello everybody and welcome to the United Stand. This is your latest Manchester United news and transfer news. Vieira, whoa, Vieira, whoa. He gave Giggsy the ball and Arsenal won. Oh, yes, it is Ryan Giggs Day. This was the day in 1999 where Ryan Giggs exposed the world to his big hairy chest and sent Arsenal out of the cup. And United went on to win a historic treble, as we know. Never forget, the banter is real for Arsenal. But into reality, we don't want to be that club that spends so long in the past. And there is something in the past about Pogba we want to talk about as well. But way down the pecking order today, we're going to be talking about have Manchester United found a new Roy Keane in their team that's currently there. We'll also be talking a little bit about Kane. But let's start off with Borussia Dortmund, Manchester United, and a little bit of Jadon Sancho, but not a lot. If you want to know the latest on Sancho, check out the video. The information I got yesterday from my source, quite interesting about the Sancho situation. But this is more about United being linked to a Jadon Sancho alternative that Dortmund are looking at. Play that back, it does make sense. So Ferran Torres, who is currently playing for Valencia, he's a right winger. He's only in his early 20s. In fact, I think he's 21. And this was the player that Dortmund was seen to be going for to replace Jadon Sancho. But Marca via Sport Witness, as I read this morning, are saying that Manchester United are also in the race and are leading the race in relation to Premier League clubs. There are a few other clubs interested in him. Dortmund looking at him as a replacement for Sancho. What's he all about? Well, I think he's got 6 goals and 7 assists for Valencia this season. Highly regarded young talent. His contract's up in 2021, which also makes him highly regarded cheap talent. He has got a £100 million release clause, but Dortmund were looking at around €40 million, which is about £35 million, which for a young up-and-coming right winger is very, very reasonable. There's a lot of tick boxes as to why clubs will be looking at this player. Very fast, great control, likes to put a cross in, can play in different positions, but predominantly plays off the right wing. Now, will Manchester United be in for this player? I would absolutely categorically say no. This is a situation where United would do well to be tactically involved for this player, because let's not forget, as I said last night, United are all in for Sancho, but they're not definitely going to get Sancho if Dortmund play hardball or Sancho goes elsewhere. So United need to be very, very careful about alternatives. And Ferran Torres at Valencia is a very decent alternative to Jadon Sancho if that deal can't be done. Now, in an ideal world, and I don't know what a lot of you will be thinking, they'll be saying, well, how's about Man United have a chat with Dortmund and say, we'll give you a clear path to Ferran Torres if you give us a clear path to Jadon Sancho. And that very well may be what actually happens. Who gets the better deal? Look, I think in many, look at what Leicester did. They let Maguire go for 80 million. They brought Sionku in. I don't know how much they bought for him, but some would say he's been one of the best centre backs, or as good as Harry Maguire this year. There are plenty of examples of players selling players for big money and then bringing in better players for cheap money. I don't think this would be the case. I think if Dortmund got Ferran Torres, I think he'd be a very good player. But come on, Jadon Sancho's Jadon Sancho. He's the most sought after right winger in world football at the moment, and this is not one of those where I'd go, well, I'd rather spend 40 million on Torres at Valencia than spend 100 million on Sancho. I think this is a very different situation. It's Sancho, and I think that's what United will and are going to do, as I said last night. But the Ferran Torres thing is interesting with the United link. Is it just chucking a United name in, which I think it probably is, or is there a bit of leverability for Manchester United that they can sort of be like, look, we do like the look of him. He looks a good player. He's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for a right winger. We want Sancho, but, we've got to look at that. And there might be a little bit of dialogue to be had with Dortmund there to say, look, we do want him. I mean, of course, let's not be arrogant here. Even if Dortmund went all in for even if we didn't get Sancho and United and Dortmund went all in for Torres, he could still say, I'm going to Dortmund because that's better for my career. Having said that, United do need a right winger. We've got a massive hole in that position. I suppose the other side to this would be, it looks like the right sort of move for him to go to Dortmund. If Sancho goes, you go to Dortmund. Less pressure in the Bundesliga. If he comes to United at 2021, have you got another Dan James situation there? I mean, he's not coming from a big club. Valencia are relatively big, but they've not been, competing for trophies for a long time. Coming into Old Trafford, a lot of pressure. Same age as Dan James, really. I mean, it's Sancho's shirt, but look, interesting that we might be looking at alternatives, because many times over the last few weeks and months we've said, what if we don't get Sancho? What is the alternative? You've seen Ziyech going to Chelsea. There are people like Adama Traore, even a Wilfried Zaha, as we spoke before. Is Ferran Torres an alternative? Because I don't think Dortmund will go for him unless they're going to lose Sancho, and I think this is probably more evidence that they're going to. So I don't think United are in for this player. I think it's chuck United in from the Spanish press. But United could use this to their advantage. They could be like, you know what, we are looking for alternatives if we can't get this deal over the line. And it'd be good business for Dortmund. Take 100 million for Sancho and then spend less than half of it on Ferran Torres as a straight replacement into the team. Let's also remember, we talk about Ferran Torres being young. He's a couple of years older than Jadon Sancho, which just shows you the trajectory of a Jadon Sancho and how important he is to United. In other news, it is Ryan Giggs Day, of course. I'll keep reminding you today, it was this day in 1999 that Ryan Giggs scored that cracking goal at Villa Park against Arsenal. Just keep reminding people on social media throughout the day. Paul Pogba spoke last night. We spoke about this yesterday morning. Pogba had done an interview with the United podcast. He spoke about his transfer to United. Has he spoken about his transfer out of United or staying at United? And as predicted, it's just an interview they did before the lockdown, so it must be at least 3 or 4 weeks old. This is an interview that's 4 weeks old, let's say. It's a month old, and it's big news today. The United have released the podcast. I mean, there's nothing relevant in there. There's nothing recent in there. There's nothing about staying at United in there. I think the most he spoke about was what's his dream goals. Well, I want to get back and win the Europa League and the FA Cup, and who knows about the Premier League next season. And I think who knows is exactly the thing. Will you even be here? Do you want to be here? But he came across as a nice guy because Paul Pogba is a nice guy, and I think people who don't like Pogba don't want to accept this. But he is a nice guy. Is he misguided? Does he want to be here? Probably not, but that's his choice. But it doesn't make him not a nice guy. I think he might have his own reasons why he wants to go. I think he only ever came to United to come back for 3 or 4 years anyway. So I always said that when we signed him. Bit disrespectful to Graham Souness, some people have said. Some people find it quite funny that he said, I don't know who he is. I didn't know his face. I've heard of him and I heard he was a great player, but I don't know who he is. Look, people will say, I'll sit down Souness. The reality is Souness has won more league titles and more European Cups than Pogba and was a very good player for Liverpool. But Paul Pogba's got every right to have a go at Souness because Souness is always having a go at Pogba. So, let it go. But ultimately, Pogba said it himself. It's about what happens on a football pitch. And I think we would all agree about Pogba. Little sat down on a sofa, United podcast, having a little subtle dig at Graham Souness is not going to bother Graham Souness because Graham Souness delivered on the pitch. This is what everyone says about Pogba. You've got to deliver on the pitch. You deliver on the pitch, doesn't matter what people say off it, does it? And consistently, Pogba hasn't delivered on the pitch for United yet. There have been moments, but there's always also been moments of disappointment. So I just want to see Paul Pogba back in the United shirt performing consistently. And, if he does start doing that, all right, maybe it's 3 years too late, but I still believe he can do it. And I do believe he'll be at United next season. So let's wait and see. Another story I read today about Harry Kane. I mean, look, I'm going to put Harry Kane in the Upper Meccano drawer now, as this is not going to happen. Thomas Partey's in there. Wilfried Ndidi's in there. These are players that are not going to happen. And I'll say this right now. For the reasons I said last night, this transfer window is going to be weird. The priority is Sancho. United need a winger and a midfielder before they look at a striker. They're not going to spend 150 or 200 million pounds on Harry Kane, and they're not going to sign a centre-back or a CDM. I would like us to buy some of those players, but we won't. As for Harry Kane, there's this sort of story that United want Harry Kane because it's the status signing that people like Edward would like. Well, this is, to me, is like being at a junction. There's Harry Kane Street and there's no forget about it street, and we should go no forget about it street, because going after Harry Kane would be a step backwards and it would be a lesson not learned to take that corner, because it would be the sort of signing that we've seen Woodward do in the past, a little bit like the Pogba signing in many ways, but Pogba made a lot more sense. He was a lot younger, had a much bigger status in world football and suited us better, even though it's not been totally successful. Harry Kane, I mean, I don't normally listen to this, but I heard somebody say today, if we did sign Harry Kane, what happens to Martial? And that's very relevant. If you sign Timo Werner, he can play in a number of positions and you've got fluidity. If you sign a player that's like, even if we've got Erling Haaland, he's a little bit younger, it can be shared out a bit. If you sign Harry Kane, he's starting every game at number 9. So what do you do with Anthony Martial? Plus you're using too much money. It's just not going to happen, and it doesn't make any sense for it to happen. So I really hope that United don't get themselves intrigued, as I've read headlines, or curious or encouraged. I would just ignore it. Let Harry Kane go where Harry Kane wants to go and not Old Trafford. Too much money, too much risk. And he's not the player, as I said before. He's very good. And I think Harry Kane is a world-class striker. I really do think that. But if Harry Kane goes to Man City or Liverpool, am I worried that they're going to be any better? No. I'm sure he'll score a lot of goals, but I don't think he makes them, oh my God, now they're going to be amazing. Whereas if Mbappe goes to Liverpool, I'm like, shit. If a Koulibaly or even a decent centre-back goes to Man City to play with Laporte and he stays fit, I'd be like, oh, that makes them better. Harry Kane doesn't make a team a title winner because he's not a title winner. And I hope that makes sense. Also, a very interesting story in the Manchester Evening News I read about have Manchester United found their new Roy Keane. Now, this is interesting because it's not McTominay, it's not Fred, it's Bruno Fernandes that they're talking about. And I thought, you know what? This is the evolution of football. This is what football is. You're gonna be very, very, very lucky to find a prototype Roy Keane. A midfielder who bollocks everyone, who's basically the manager on the pitch, leads you to many titles, absolutely intrinsic in a world-class side. That's not what you're going to find 20 years after Roy Keane was playing his best football. What we need is an evolution of a Roy Keane. And I thought this was an interesting article to say, well, Bruno Fernandes is that. Bruno Fernandes is definitely a leader. Bruno Fernandes is definitely somebody on the pitch who does something that Roy Keane did, who's pointing at people, he's telling people off, he's telling them what to do. Bruno does that. We've seen that in the short time he's been here. And on top of that, he isn't the holding midfielder, he isn't the box-to-box midfielder, he's more of an attacking player. But you're looking, the point of the article, I think, and the reason it drew me in is because we're looking at an evolution of a Roy Keane, a modern-day Roy Keane, not somebody who's going to go and snap someone in two, who's going to start fighting with the referee, because those days have changed. But it's somebody who can grab hold of a team, who inspires a team, who instructs a team, and takes a team to a next level. And it's very early days with Bruno Fernandes. And I always say what Paul Robinson said, one of our moderators, is very true. The fear with Bruno is, are we going to have that initial bounce, a bit like Ollie, for 3 months, and then as he gets used to what goes on at United, mediocrity reigns, and then we have an inconsistent year from Bruno. I don't think we're going to have that if you know enough about Bruno Fernandes, but what I do think is that he could be, maybe will be, our next sort of big captain of the club. Maybe he will never have the armband, but what I've seen, and I've mentioned this a few times with Bruno Fernandes, is Bruno's the catalyst to keeping Ole Gunnar Solskjaer the job. And I said that when we were linked to him in January. I said, if we get Bruno, I'll give Ole a lot more time because I think he's the right signing for many reasons. Take Bruno out of that team, I think Ole would have got sacked. We just lost to Burnley. We're not doing particularly well, and we didn't have Pogba or Rashford either. So we would have carried on with the same team that was mediocre at best. Bruno came in and inspired the team, but it wasn't just Bruno. Bruno's been brilliant on his own, but the response of players around him, Martial's got better, McTominay's got better, Matic has got better, Fred's got better, Luke Shaw's got better, Maguire's got better. So many players got better when Bruno came into the team. It was like that number 10 was the missing piece of the puzzle in many ways, even though we still need a right winger. So Bruno already has proven that as an individual, he's a massively important player for United. But as a team leader, he's massively inspired those players around him, and that to me is the potential of, look, is Bruno the next Roy Keane? Of course he's not. There's no Roy Keane. He's the greatest Premier League captain by a long way, and he was inspirational for Manchester United. But to get somebody who's even close to that would be an achievement that United haven't achieved since basically Roy Keane retired however many years ago, 15 years ago, or left Manchester United. So I'm encouraged by Bruno Fernandes, and I don't think he's going to wear the captain's armband. I think that will be Harry Maguire, but his leadership skills are there to be seen, and I think it's going to be very interesting how that builds out over the coming weeks and months when we get the football back. So yeah, I was quite liked that story. I was intrigued by it, and I think it's one to watch out for. Another thing to watch out for is in relation to Premier League return. We get a different story every day. There is now talk that Manchester United and other clubs could well be playing all their games at Wembley, and they could be housed at St George's Park, which is England's training camp, and they'll be there for a month to play all these games. As I've said, I can only observe. I think there's so many leaks at the moment. It's like a hedgehog rolling on a lilo. It's ridiculous, but I think what's going to happen, my prediction is that a European league will come back, whether it's the Liga or Bundesliga or the French league. These leagues will come back before the Premier League. That will put a massive amount of pressure on the Premier League to get their football back, and we will do it. But we've got to do it in a safe way, and I think that's the way the Premier League have basically said they're raring to go, but they can't go at the moment, and they'll only go when the government say it's safe to do it, and then they'll implement everything that they need to do. I mean, there's so much money in football. They will literally test every player before every game, after every game. There'll be lots and lots of things done. But what I do have in the back of my head is this. There is no way we're going to bring Premier League football back, and at some point we're not going to have a player of a Premier League club or a couple of players who go down with the virus. Then that club's going to have to self-isolate for 2 weeks at least. Any team that they've played around them will have to self-isolate, and then do the wheels of the league come off? I think we'll see the drop in the curve, and thank God I think we're going to see the drop in the amount of deaths and misery that this pandemic is causing around the world. We'll see that, but we're not going to see it disappear. And I think with so many footballers and so many coaches involved, I just think we will bring football back, but it will be disjointed, because I think we will see players still picking up the virus, and then you're going to have a lag of games, and that might be an obstruction that they can't get over, but we'll have to wait and see. Thanks everyone for watching. Smash a like on the video. We've got the Flex and Rant show coming up for you at 1 o'clock. I'll be live at 8 o'clock. Have a fantastic day, and I'll speak to you all soon.